the last thing you ever want to have is a VC telling you exactly what to do, because they're probably wrong. They're not in the day-to-day, in the trenches. And so, you need to make up your own mind. You need to be able to, again, take that feedback that the market is telling you and make that decision. We can't fault you for that. And we need to be able to, but you need to be able to trust us that if you tell us something that is a problem, that we will continue to support you. And that's a big part of what we do.
Welcome to the CoCoon podcast. My name is Erica, managing partner at CoCoon Ignite Ventures. Together with my two other managing partners at the fund, Theodore and Roland, we invite you to tune in here, where you will find conversations we have with founders and investors on the future and sustainability of work. We have been talking and listening to founders and investors in Silicon Valley, Southeast Asia, Greater Bay Area, and the One Belt region for over a decade. There is so much to learn through venture capital conversations, and we decided to turn these meetings into a podcast to demystify what actually happens on the ground. If you're inspired by these stories and want to work or collaborate with any of our founders or investors, then our call to action is reach out by searching for CoCoon Born to Fly on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect there. Hey, Maarten, cool. Thank you for joining us today. So happy to have you. Let's start with your roots. I know you have a Dutch heritage, and now you spend your time between Palo Alto, Tokyo, Singapore, and Amsterdam. Can you share more about your roots? Like, where did you grow up?
So my parents are diplomats, so I grew up all around the world. I was born in Iran. I've lived in Norway, Nigeria, Trinidad, Iraq, England. So yeah, I grew up all around the world, and as an international kid, I was always either at the British school or the American school or the international school. So yeah, I grew up all around the world, but yeah, I still only have one passport, and that's my Dutch passport.
I had no idea you were born in Iran and that your parents are diplomats. Wow. Wait, so you've been traveling around the world, studying around the world. You did your college degree in the UK. What brought you to the US eventually?
So when I was in the UK, I was doing electronics, and I've always loved computers and programming. So when I went to university and I did electronics, I was like, okay, well, where can I use this? I had an internship, like a summer internship, at Deutsche Bank in London, working on the IT systems, working on stuff like trading systems and stuff like that. And I did that for a little while, but I realized that wasn't really where I wanted to be. And so when I graduated, I was like, okay, well, let's go to Silicon Valley. Let's go to the home of tech. And so we moved out to Silicon Valley, got a job at a friend's startup that quickly failed. So then I went to Sun Microsystems and just worked my way through the valley.
I love internships. Sometimes internships tell you what you really want to do. Sometimes they tell you what you really don't want to do, and you save a lot of time, which I think for a college graduate, time is your greatest asset. You have a lot of it, so use it. So you were at Sun Microsystems, and I know you later spent 6 years at Google, and you were working on the Nexus phone there. And okay, full disclosure, I do have a first generation Nexus. I was one of your users.
There you go.
What was it like to be a part of the Google hardware team at sort of the dawn of smartphones?
It was, it was exciting. I think, and I've never, it was incredibly hard work. But what made it so much fun was the people that you got to work with. Putting together some hardware and then trying to change an industry like the telecoms industry was a big ask, right? Normally, companies would be developing phones in, a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, and we were doing it in 6 months. And so, we were pushing the envelope, trying to get these phones out, trying to have hardware to help the software continue to develop and mature. And so that was what we were doing. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of late nights, but it was a great experience.
I love that startup experience of doing something brand new that no one's done before, and you have to go like hack all the sort of new processes and figure things out before anyone else has.
I mean, Google made it, gave us the tools that we needed to get stuff done. And that was the really special part, was, being put in an environment to succeed. We were not, our challenge was difficult enough that, trying to get these devices out so quickly, but, Google gave you the resources to do stuff. Like if you needed to build your own anechoic chamber to test RF signals, go get it. They didn't nickel and dime you trying to say, oh well, do you really need it, or is it, it was just like, okay, this needs to be done, let's go do it. So that was also part of the fun part about it, was you got given the tools to go off and succeed at the big audacious goal that they had set for you.
Now, do you remember how we first met? It was about 6 to 8 years ago. My friend Greg
it was a while ago.
emailed me and he was like, Erica, you got to meet Maarten from Quest Venture Partners. I was like, okay, let's meet. So I get this question a lot. How does someone who starts from an operational side move on to the investor side? How did you move on to Quest Venture Partners from Google?
So for me, having worked at Google for about 7 years, like it was basically 2012, and I'd started to realize that Google was becoming a very, very big company. One of the things I'd learned at Sun Microsystems was I don't do well in a big organization. And so when I was sort of towards the end of 2012, it was really like, okay, I've done so many phones, we understand the process, it's the same stuff again, only now it's just with more office politics. And so that's not what I do, that's not what I'm good at. And so I basically was like, okay, time to go find a new challenge. And I looked around Google, obviously, because I mean, we were doing Waymo, or it was called Chauffeur at the time, and there was Google Glass, there was a bunch of the Google X projects that were still out there, that people were doing, but none of the projects really spoke to me as to like, oh, this is something I really want to work on. And what I wanted to do was have another potential impact in another industry, right? We had changed the advertising industry at Google with search, through our search system. We had changed the telecoms industry through Android, and so I was like, okay, how do I put another dent in some other industry? Didn't find anything at Google. So then Marcus was a good friend, and he was doing his own sort of micro VC angel investing with his own family money, and he explained what he was doing, what early stage investing was all about, and that spoke to me. It was like, okay, yeah, like it's doing the same thing that we did at Android when we started from zero, right? And so I was like, okay, let's try this out. And so that's when, in 2013, I finally decided to leave. And then I joined Marcus and Andy, and we sort of put a little bit of our money together, and then we just started investing. And but we wanted more. We wanted to make a venture fund, a proper venture fund, but none of us really had any finance background, so we just started networking, and we raised some capital from friends and family in Silicon Valley, and then we networked our way to Japan and found some more capital there, and networked our way to Taiwan and then Hong Kong and then Singapore, and sort of we networked our way around Asia, and that's how we sort of cobbled together this LP base all around Asia. Yeah.
I love what you talked about in starting from zero, whether it was working on Android, the Nexus phone, or starting this venture capital fund. I'm a big fan of Marcus and Andy. Three of you are very different personalities. I totally see how together you have a lot of synergy. So you talked a bit about raising capital out here in Asia. So I know you travel a lot between Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan. Tell us more about this building this investor base, and also deploying capital. What has been your strategy so far?
So the original idea was to just raise capital and invest in startups, and make a good return. But what we found was, as we networked our way through Asia, there is something that we believe that other venture firms don't have, and that is our LP base itself. Our LP base became as valuable to us as the capital that they injected. We have investors such as Sony Music Entertainment Japan, Fuji Media Holdings, Naver, Mide Asset, and then large family offices in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan. And those family offices also have their own industries, their own companies that they're managing. And what happened was we started to understand that if we worked with them, if we shared deal flow, if we talked to our LPs, we actually start to make better investment decisions. And so, what really sort of set us apart, and what became very, very crucial to us is our LP base itself, not just for the capital they invest, but for who they are and how they want to work with us. And Asia is always interested about doing deals. They want to do deals. They'll learn. They want to expand. They want to grow. And so when we have a question or we have a potential investment, there's always some interest from someone in Asia to say, okay, well, let's take a look. Let's see if we can do something, right? The US is still the biggest single market in the world right now, right? And that's not going to change anytime soon for venture capital. And so, when we have companies that are growing fast in the US, then there's always somebody in Asia that's like, oh, okay, like let's see what it looks like.
This is very inspiring. I think raising capital from Asian corporates with the likes of Sony Music and these sort of slightly more traditional entertainment media companies. How do you get through the door? How do you unlock these relationships? Which typically, I think it's quite the environment or the ecosystem is quite closed.
I mean, it takes time. You have to, but I mean, it's also understanding your audience, right? Understanding what people want. And, there are different types of investors. Some investors want just pure financial return, right? The endowments of the world, the pension funds, they only care about one thing, which is return. That's what they're set up for. Then there's other investors that are like, they're heat seekers. They want action. They want the most exciting startups and the big names. They want to be associated with that. But if you look at some of the Asian LPs, what they want is they want to understand, and they want learn. They want information in addition to the good returns. And so, by understanding what they're looking for and how they operate, that's how we've been able to sort of position ourselves to say, look, we work as a team here. Yes, you're an LP. Yes, you're investing capital, and we're going to invest for you and hopefully generate a great return. But through us, you have this insight into what is going on in Silicon Valley. Why? What are some of the categories in tech that are of value to us? Or of value to your industry, right? One of the things that they always are interested in is like, where is the next, where does disruption come from? Disruption doesn't come from inside your industry, it comes from outside your industry every single time. And so that's what they're trying to understand. And because we're such an early stage fund, we're giving our LPs, maybe a 3 to 5 year head start on learning what these categories are before they become super, super big, or when they actually hit to a certain size that they're actually useful to to one of our LPs. They've been able to track that category for a while. So this is how we work with our LPs.
This is fascinating. I think this is really great insight in terms of how Asian LPs want to understand and want information so they can see where disruption is coming, and also like be able to see around the bend, what's happening 3 to 5, 5 to 7 years from now, and what can we do about it? Like, how do you feel like, or what's your experience been in terms of how these LPs interact with this data? Like, do they do follow-on investments? Do they do co-investments? Do they further develop technology in sectors that they learn about?
It depends. Some of them will want to do direct investments, and we can help facilitate that where it works. Some of them are just sort of using that information for their corporate strategy. Some of them are spending a lot of time trying to figure out, like, maybe there's a new line of business that we need to open, right? And so they'll talk to the startup, understand what's going on, and then maybe when the startup is big enough, then they might actually do a deal together for like business development. So it really varies. Each LP has their own approach, their own style. They're all unique. But those are sort of the three categories that come into play.
Now, from LPs, let's go to like talk about founders. So a lot of people, when you start a fund, will be like, what are some of your best companies? I want to flip that over. Let's talk about the companies that failed first. Like, what were some of the attributes? Like, what were some of the telltale signs after looking at so many when like you're like, either the founder didn't work, or the idea didn't work, or the execution didn't work, or the timing? Like, what was it that you learned from some of the companies that didn't make it?
I think the underlying problem is, for want of a better term, what I would say dynamism. What I mean by that is the founders that didn't make it were still very, very determined, but couldn't change their approach, or couldn't adjust or think out of a way in which to get to be successful. Those are the ones that really sort of didn't, they failed and sort of essentially went to zero, or got bought for pennies on the dollar. And so the thing is that you have to be, as a founder, you have to be, people are now talking about it a lot more, but you have to be resilient. You have to be able to take a punch, and keep going. But what you also have to be able to do is to say, hold on, is my approach working? If it's not working, why? And people sometimes talk about like, oh, well, timing is wrong or something like that. Yeah, that may be true, but maybe there's like a different segment of the market that you need to look at, or maybe there's a way to approach it differently. So it really is about understanding the feedback that you're getting from the market, from your customers, from your lack of customers, and then saying, okay, well, what do I do? How do I flip this around? And so for those companies that have failed in our portfolio, that was one of the big things. The founders just couldn't find a way to take on what the market was telling them, and adjust course.
Dynamism. I think that's such a great word. Dynamism, in terms of finding their way through the challenges, understanding feedback. Dynamism as a team leader to get people, to attract the best people to surround you and make things happen. Dynamism to attract your customers to want to work with you and be like, there are 50 other of these solutions out there. I pick you because I believe you can do it and make it happen. And
it's the approach you take for getting your customers, right? So if yes, you spent a bunch of money on AdWords, and it's not generating the funnel for you, well, maybe there's now you've got to go think about something else, right? Do you try a LinkedIn campaign, or do you park a taco truck outside of a convention center and just start giving away free tacos? You have to understand how to think and absorb the feedback, and then say, okay, what do we need to do to change? That's the most important part of it.
That's one attribute I find in all successful entrepreneurs: their growth mindset, their limitless mindset. I mean, they don't make less mistakes than other people. They just make more mistakes faster. And like you say, absorb the feedback and move forward. One of the companies that moved forward that I want to talk about here is Amplitude. So in September 2021, Amplitude went public at a $5 billion valuation, having raised $150 million US from Quest Venture Partners, Sequoia, and GIC. So can we talk about Amplitude? When did you write the first check, and why?
I wrote the first check in 2013, late 2013, like November or something like that. And essentially the investment came about because Spencer and Curtis had gone through YC, but they had pivoted their company mid YC. And so people were kind of like, oh, well, they pivoted mid YC. They're off. They're kind of like, okay, a lot of people had written them off. Spencer and Curtis came to me and they said, okay, we're going to do mobile analytics. And I said, okay, mobile analytics is important, right? The mobile industry is growing and growing and growing, and more and more money is coming through the mobile device. You're going to need analytics. And it really was, when I sat down with Spencer, his drive, his resilience, his smarts, and then being backed up by Curtis, who was an engineer from Google at the time. They had all of the sort of attributes that we look for in founders. Then I looked at their API for instrumenting an app. I instrumented an app. I ran it, and I was like, wow, this is working, and it's very elegantly built. The engineering was good, and so I said, we've got to invest in these guys. A lot of people at the time were like, no, there's Kissmetrics, there's Mixpanel, there's all these other competitors, there's Google Analytics for free. Why would you use Amplitude? And I kind of felt like these guys are just going to out engineer everybody else, and that's exactly what they did. They did for $1 what everybody else was charging for 10, and so yeah, that's sort of that was the bet I made.
2013. So that's pretty much when you guys first started the fund.
Yeah.
And so this was one of your first companies. So you talked about how they pivoted from YC. I'm sure between 2013 and 2021, there were lots of ups and downs. Can you maybe unpack one or two of them? Because I think people want to hear about how did they get through the really hard bits?
So, I mean, the first thing that they did was, we made the investment in 2013, then they spent all of 2014 basically re-architecting the back end. So they didn't do anything. They were just building. And, I mean, obviously that's a little worrisome, but, we knew it needed to be done. And so I just told them, just build that ingestion, data sponge. Get the data, store it so much more cheaply than anybody else. We're gonna win, and so that whole year they were building, and then in 2015 they started releasing their product, and at the time you could go, you got Mixpanel. Mixpanel gave you I think 1,000 data points for free, and Amplitude gave you 10,000 data points for free. And the trick was, we could have given 50,000 data points for free. We didn't care. They had really built such a strong platform that they were going to crush everybody else. And so that's sort of why that was one of the big things when they started re-architecting the system and weren't really focused on any customers or anything like that. I think once they launched this They had some initial traction. They were doing well, but the sales team needed to be changed out. The sales team was focused on or had expertise in one customer set, small startups, when they needed to grow to another level, right? It's rare that a sales team can grow from startup all the way to IPO, the same sales guys. They all have their own sort of speciality in who they sell to, at what stage they sell. And so that was another challenge when we had to, build a new sales team for the company for the new stage that they were going out to.
This is fascinating to hear that, a highly technical company also needs to focus on the sales portion. Because in my mind, it's always left wing, right wing, right? Your left wing is your innovation. What does your technology do? Your right wing is your people. How do you get your sales team to go get the right customers? So, yeah. I mean, I feel like I want to unpack a few things in there. Number one, like you are their technical investor. What do the founders come to you for? Because like other than raising money or raising capital at every 18 months, I feel like founders come to investors to ask very specific questions. What questions do you often get asked, or at least from Amplitude?
I mean, we just, the way we work is we try to establish a relationship between the founder and ourselves that removes any tension. And there's naturally tension between the founder and the investor, right? How could there not be? This investor gave you $500,000. Like the last thing you want to tell them that you screwed up and you burned through 300K and now you need another 150K, right? So there's this natural tension, and we at Quest try to really, really remove that. We want them to feel like they can come and tell us their problems, because we know at the early stage it's just constantly going wrong until it isn't. And so if you're just going to come and tell us that everything is a-okay and everything's great, then we know that that's not the case. In terms of Spencer and Curtis, I think they've spent a lot of time asking us for help around particularly hiring. They wanted to hire the best, and so they needed us to talk to some of these candidates and explain or sort of sell, why Amplitude over something, another company. So they came to us for that. They also asked us a bit about engineering processes, like how did we handle software engineering at Google, or things like that. So there's a little bit of guidance there. And then in general, it's just sort of like, how are you doing, right? Being a founder in a startup can be a pretty lonely experience because of the fact that you're the head of the team and you can't share all of the problems with your team. You have to share all of the success, but you can't share all of the problems. And so a lot of our time is just spent asking, how are you doing, right? How's things going?
Removing tension and building that trust so founders can come to you, because you're so right. It's constant chaos and something's wrong pretty much every day. That's why they are in a startup. And, for them to have such a strong relationship to be able to come back and tell you things, and unpack them and get through them, like you said, understand the feedback and build that resilient approach, so that they can survive, the 9 years, the 10 years that it takes to build the company.
It really is important at the early stage that you have the team around you of investors that will be there for the bad times. There are, unfortunately, there are VCs out there that if you give them bad news, they essentially ghost you. They write you off, and then they'll move on to the next investment. We try not to do that, and so that's where it's important for us to be able to say, no, you really can tell us all of the horror stories, because otherwise we can't help. We can't tell you what to do. the last thing you ever want to have is a VC telling you exactly what to do, because they're probably wrong. They're not in the day-to-day, in the trenches. And so, you need to make up your own mind. You need to be able to, again, take that feedback that the market is telling you and make that decision. We can't fault you for that. And we need to be able to, but you need to be able to trust us that if you tell us something that is a problem, that we will continue to support you. And that's a big part of what we do.
And I really resonate with the lonely part. I find that founders are very lonely. Just because they have 5, 10, 100 people working around them doesn't make the journey any less lonely, because they have to keep the front up, whether it's for investors, whether it's for their team or their customers, that everything's a-okay. But, as their friends and their investors and the people who go through the very difficult trenches with them, we know the truth. And like you said, getting them to be able to tell us the truth is like 80% of the job, because we spend 20% of the time really going out to sell stuff, but we need to face the truth so we can get through the growth curve. Talking about sales, I want to unpack that a little bit more. Hiring and sales. Can you share a few pieces of advice to founders in terms of, like, for example, in this case, a technical founder or 2 technical founders? How do they round out their team? What should they be doing to attract more talent? And also, what are some of the things to look for in a good sales team?
I mean, in terms of Spencer and Curtis, Spencer had the more, he was the CEO. He had the ability to sell himself. So he had a little bit of that non-technical marketing ability. I think if you are a technical team, then yes, you do need to have a non-technical person, somebody who understands marketing and sales, as one of your team, because they're going to be able to tell you how to approach a customer far better than you are. I mean, unless you're developing something specifically for engineers or for developers, and maybe you can relate to that person. That might be okay, but at the end of the day, if you're selling to SMBs or even the Fortune 500, you're going to need somebody who can understand the customer need and translate your product's features and value add into something that they're going to want. I think for sales is it's a different mentality than it is for engineers. Salespeople good salespeople are driven by the challenge of what they can sell, and how much they can sell of it. So they're happy to be in a position where they eat what they kill, for want of a better term, right? So they have a low salary, but they can make it up in the commissions, and that should be okay to them. If it's a salesperson, it's like, no, I need a really high salary and low commission, then that is not a salesperson. Salesperson is one who has the self-confidence to say, yeah, I can take this product and I can sell it to, a lot of people. So if you just make my money on commission, that's fine. So salespeople, you need to understand that that's how an environment that they thrive in. And then you also need to understand that they have their own ability or their own niche in which they can sell. So whether it's an SMB, whether it's a Fortune 500, things like that. And you need to be, a little bit ruthless. You have to say, look, you're the sales targets. If you don't meet it, then you go find another sales guy. And it's perfectly valid to have sales, churn in your sales organizations as you continue to grow the company and develop the market, your go-to-market plan as to who you need to sell to get to the next level.
That is such great advice, because at different stages in your growth curve, you will need different types of sales teams.
Yes,
and like you said,
it's normal.
They have their sweet spot, and they eat what they kill. So if you're very early, you probably are selling to startups, but by the time you're selling to the Fortune 500s, it's a totally different ball game. On this note, I want to kick the ball forward into another ball game. I know in Fund 3, you guys have invested in Neurable, which is a hardware company building a brain computer interface. Now there's a lot happening in hardware. So Meta and Oculus Quest and the likes, or Apple glasses, they are building for the metaverse, for VR. But I think it's a sign that something more is happening, more in IoT. Hardware is no longer just going to track our steps. It's really going to like bridge the divide between a human brain and a computer. So where is Neurable going, and why did you guys invest in them?
So basically, Neurable was I got a demo from Ramses a few years ago, and there are times. There's only been a few times when I've had this sort of wow moment with hardware. I had it with one of the Nexus phones a while ago, and it's rare that a piece of technology is like, you're like, wow, this is really impressive. And so when I was doing the demo, it was a very simple game where you were thinking about an action, and then in the VR game it would happen. And at some point, for the first 10 minutes, you're sort of concentrating and say, think, pick up the rock, and you think, throw the rock. And after 10 minutes, I kind of realized I wasn't even concentrating anymore. It was just happening as I was doing it. And so that's when I was like, okay, this does have a future as a new type of interface for computing. And that's why I made the investment. I said, look, there's a lot of other brain computer interfaces out there trying to do things like, Neuralink, which is like, trying to put actual hardware into your brain. There were experiments at Stanford that they tried to put a mesh on top of the brain. These are invasive, and I don't think are suitable for the casual user. So I was always looking for a non-invasive technology to do this, and so that's when I saw Neurable, I was like, this is it. So this is the one that we need to bet on.
I met an engineer at Neuralink, and I was like, this sounds really cool, but super scary. So how does Neurable? How does the hardware work? Is it like a headset?
Because it's basically, it looks like headphones, like a big just ordinary Beats headphones, and those headphones have small antennas built into the ear cups, and they are able to pick up the brain waves and interpret the brain waves and basically map the brain waves to an action. And so this is where we can do, if you think of an action like, page up, page down, volume up, play a track, it can map those brain waves to those actions and then carry them out for you, so you don't have to touch them. So it's not understanding your thought in terms of like trying to visualize what you're thinking. It's mapping the brain waves to what your intent is.
How does the training work? So I think it once, and then I do it manually to start the mapping going.
There are, right now you have to do a calibration step, which is sort of like, you give it certain, you go through a sequence of actions, and it's mapping your brain waves to those actions. But over time, the idea is that it will learn, and it will understand some of the actions that you're doing. And so hopefully there won't be any, we come to a point where you put the headphones on, and it doesn't need any more calibration. It's seen enough brain waves from enough users that it understands what you want. And we'll get to that point at some point, in a couple of years. But right now, You have to sort of train it for particular actions.
This is so cool. I think from haptics to voice and now to brain waves, humans and computers, the gap between us is really narrowing. And like you said, it probably will take a few years for all this training to happen, but in due time, with all the data, it will be a very, very exciting world. Wow, to be able to put on a headset and be able to tell my computer to read my emails or call a car or,
well,
open a game, play a song.
That's the thing. Like, people think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I put the headset on and then I play a track and it plays the track? And that's not where we're stopping. What we're going beyond that, right? Which is, if I put the headset on and I have a desire to play music, I don't even have to think about open Spotify or open music player. It will just do that, right? So the same way, like, if I'm listening to music and it's a little too loud, I don't have to think, reduce the volume. It's going to reduce the volume already because it understands from my brainwaves that I am not comfortable with the volume, and that it will then understand and say, okay, let me lower the volume for you. And that's the true point at which I think we will have, a brain-computer interface that is the next stage of computing. When it's anticipating and when it's understanding the context that you're in and responding to you as the user.
This idea of advancing forward, using a brain-computer interface is so exciting. On the topic of advancing forward, I know you guys are raising your fund 4. So tell us a bit about sort of what is your investor strategy or your deployment strategy? Like, how do you see the post-COVID world and what does it need next?
We definitely want to double down on what we have built with Fund 2 and Fund 3 in terms of our LP base and working with our LP base. I think that it has provided us with a unique advantage that nobody else has in the Valley, where, if there is a question about a company or about Asia, we have a network that we can tap into. And so we want to continue to build that base out. We want to bring on more companies, more families with businesses, because that's really the best way that we can leverage ourselves leverage ourselves up in the Valley. In terms of deployment, the early stage is going to be exactly the space in which you want to be for the next year, because I know for a fact that right now in Silicon Valley, at Apple, at Google, at Facebook, at Microsoft, there are these entrepreneurs that have an inkling, an idea that's kind of gnawing at them, and they are considering leaving. They've survived this first round of layoffs because they're good engineers or good at what they do, but they have this this idea that keeps irritating them, and they're thinking about leaving. And generally what happens is they'll think about it over Christmas, they'll come back in the new year, they'll get past bonus season, and then they're going to make that decision to leave and start a company. And it's those founders next year, mid-year, starting those new startups that are the ones that are going to be the new batch of, the next Google, the next Airbnb, the next whatever, right? They always are the people that are going to be the ones you want to invest in. So I think next year is going to be a very, very good year for us in terms of finding those founders that are really driven, smart people, and so yeah, I'm excited for it. Yeah.
The best founders and the best investors are always contrarians. Like when everybody's talking about recession or slowdown, all you see is how everybody at the big tech are thinking about really working on their ideas and waiting for that timing so you can get your first check in these companies at seed stage. That is exactly, I think, the kind of thing that investors like yourself who are always betting early and betting right have insight on. Last question, Maarten. If you're right, how do you see the future? 7 to 10 years from now, what do you think the world will be like because of your investments?
I hope to see that we actually have a very, very smart world. And I think what I mean by that is we talk a lot about AI being everywhere. It's not everywhere. Everything right now has to have an uplink to the cloud for AI processing. We're still at the beginning stages of having enough clean data to usefully train models and get value out of AI. And the processing has been a problem because it has to happen in the cloud at a very expensive GPU. What we're seeing right now is the deployment or the push of AI to the edge, meaning that things really can start to get smarter. Your for one of a term, your coffee cup can start to become smarter. You can start to push light sensors and switches and stuff to have their own onboard AI processing. And then tag that with things like brain-computer interfaces. Now we really have a smart world where, light switches and things can respond to the context of the users that are, that they are working with. And that's what I see as being very interesting. And obviously all the data you can pull from that, all the interesting side benefits of that as well.
Always inspired by you, Maarten.
Yeah, no, happy to help anytime.
Hey, thank you for listening today. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to hear more from entrepreneurs and investors on why they got started, how they got through the hard parts, and what they'll be doing next. If you're inspired by these stories and want to work or collaborate with any of our founders or investors, reach out by searching for CoCoon Born to Fly on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect there. Download more episodes or subscribe via Spotify or YouTube.